I'm an alcoholic. I'm a member of the big book study group from Pompano, Florida. And my name is Eddy. Anniversaries in AA, whether they be for group or conference or national or international, are public demonstrations of how the grace of God works through us. It is an indication that unity, which is the first of our traditions, has been the strong link in the chain that has kept us all together who stayed until we have a 52-year link chain. I'd like to add my congratulations to the 5 districts of visitors and friends of this conference. I know from tradition that the primary purpose of every group is to help the sick and suffering alcoholic. And a full house tonight is clearly indicative of the fact that each of the districts and the groups in the districts have been carrying the message, and may God bless your efforts. I came to AA because I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. That was a personal appraisal, because at that time science and medicine hadn't got into the act. I knew what it was, and I thank God and have thanked God daily that through His grace I was given that second chance. On the 5th day of January in 1943, I was carted from my apartment in the same ambulance that I rode daily as a police reporter. I was admitted to a municipal hospital, and because of a city ordinance, I had to be accepted. And so for those of you who go into hospitals now where you have to be cleared through the admissions with questions such as, do you have Blue Cross, Blue Shield, or other such things, they didn't ask me any questions, because the ambulance surgeon who admitted me had marked me as DOA, dead on arrival. So I wasn't saying much. Since medicine is not an exact science, and they too can make mistakes, I can truthfully say that neither did I harbor a resentment that they were wrong, nor did I plan any suit, because in those days the suits weren't as fashionable as they have become in the States. It was the grace of God that gave me this second chance. In the apartment building in which I lived, there were 2 supervising nurses who wanted to enjoy their day off. But when they found out that a drinking buddy of theirs was being carted away, they cared enough to ride with me on that trip. And it was because they were there that I was not taken from the admission area into the deep freeze, where once they have taken from you your earthly possessions, mine included at that time a bathrobe, clean pajamas, slippers, and a half pint that I hadn't got around to finish. They told me, and I accept their words, because for 18 hours after that they put me in and out of respirators, and that I used much more than a quota allotted to any patient of the injections of life-determining chemicals. There were no intensive care in hospitals at that time, so these good women, real friends, at a time when you need real friends, stayed with me for that time. And when they were able to find vital signs, I was moved from what had been a supply closet into a ward where I was to become the least of 37 occupants of that ward. And where I was to open my pretty baby blue eyes and have no recollection of from whence I came, where I was, and I certainly didn't have any long-range plans. Go ahead, laugh, but don't let it happen to you. It was a room that was longer than this, but not quite as wide. On either side were 18 beds, and down at the end where we came in was Exhibit A. I had been issued the uniform of the day, the draft up the back deal. I had been given the allotted dose of medication, which is called formaldehyde, Frackie for short. Even the most hardened, battled, scarred drunks couldn't keep it down. So those uniforms that were issued soon had psychedelic painting on them. In fact, one nurse said that it was, to her knowledge, the first real pollution area she had worked in. Every day, the doctor in charge of the service came with the Doctors Casey and Kildare of the early 40s these new neophytes in medical training steered a clear path through that wide middle aisle. And they looked with horror on what they saw. It really wasn't a beauty contest. And so they went through a ritual that is known as the Grand Rounds, led by the good doctor. They stopped occasionally at beds along the way where either an intern or resident made a presentation, as they called it. And all of us were equal, as in much greater sense than the Constitution guaranteed it. We were all addressed as inebriates. But then the poet said, "A rose is a rose is a rose." When the lesser lights had been taken care of, they proceeded down to my bed, which was at the end of the ward, up against the wall. I had restraining belts across my shoulders and across my knees. I was in a crib-side bed. I was 40, and when I came to see where I was, I thought I had gone and come back again. One day the good doctor came, and he stood before my bed, and he looked through the bars, and he said, "Eddy, you are an alcoholic. As God is my witness, it was the nicest thing that anybody had said to me in a long time." It was tantamount to getting a raise or another stripe. Of course, I didn't know what an alcoholic was. Like many people even today, 44 years later, think that an alcoholic must be an indigent, must wear heavy clothing, all that he owns at the same time, must carry the standard bag, and walk with some sort of a shuffle. Today they've added the Valium shuffle, which not only will wear out your heels on your shoes, but also will do a terrific job to your central nervous system. So the doctor said to me, "If you drink again," and in parentheses, his, "and we expect you will die." I was 40 years old. I just read a book that life began at 40. I hadn't learned anything about projection. So I was ready and willing to move whenever it was possible. People have asked me on occasions, "Didn't you resent what the doctor said?" I didn't know what a resentment was until I came to AA. I never considered a bar clinic where I was diagnosed as having certain character defects. In the long, mile-long mirror, like a peacock, I admired myself and congratulated the Creator on what he had made. Because when you can't see, things look so much better. The doctor asked me if I would condescend, that's his verb, to talk to somebody from AA. I must have said yes. I was a captive audience anyway. And so one night in January in 1943, two strangers came. I saw them as they stopped to ask directions from a charge nurse who had great body language. She didn't even look in the direction, but her head gave them that. And so I saw two men heading in my direction. I have no idea what I thought of at that time. But they came. It was an open ward, but the only visitors were process servers and the orderlies who rushed the bedpans. So I gained stature. They came and they stood, and one man smiled, and he didn't have any dentures, and I got confidence he can't bite. And the other man was a fashion plate. He was as I had been, clean shaven, clean linen, with a reasonable knowledge as from whence I came, where I was, and where I might be going. Now, they told me about themselves, and since most of us who come think that nobody is worse than we are, I listened to their stories. And then I wondered if AA had a farm club that I could go to and prepare to come up into the majors. If they had come to my bedside, as I have witnessed in the past many years when I was active on the clinical staff of a treatment center, not a detox, a treatment center, and said to the patient in the bed, and these are members of our fellowship speaking, "It's damn good enough for you. We told you so." If they had said that to me, the interview would have been completed before it began. They didn't. They invited me to come to AA. I didn't know what AA was, but people weren't asking me to come anywhere. They didn't tell me that I had to stay sober before the meeting, which in my case was over 2 weeks rather, before there was a meeting. At that time, there were no meetings in Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire. There were 2 meetings in Massachusetts, one in Boston and one in Worcester, both on the same night. We're not only not organized at times, we don't plan too well either. There was no AA in Rhode Island. There was no AA in Connecticut East until you got to New Haven. So we didn't say go to 90 meetings in 90 days. It would have taken me a year and 11 months to do it. I can remember when I was discharged. It was pretty much like a body shop. They rolled you in, they whacked out the dents in your fenders, they spray painted you, and then they gave you a push to start the motor. That was it. But because I had caused them some concern, because the 2 nurses that were supervisors were up several times during the day to see that those who were entrusted with my care were taking good care of me. The nicest thing that any of the nurses on that floor said to me, and we have to understand they hadn't seen the likes of us, was, why the hell don't you get up out of your bed and give it to someone who was sick? My chart still had me officially dead. And the scarlet blanket, which is the clear indicator that you are not going to bother anybody else anymore, was on my bed. But times have changed. We have come a long ways, baby. Even nurses are in our program. And doctors, and priests, and ministers, and rabbis, and people like you and I. We are, without question, the most democratic. That's used as a term, as a form of government, not a party. Once we enter the room of an AA meeting, you and I are as good as anyone in that meeting, but not a damn bit any better. That's where trouble starts. And so, on a night in a blizzard where public transportation had been shut down, I put on outer garments, and in a forced march with the wind at my back, I passed 2 bars that I never could have made before. And I stood at the entrance of a subterranean room under an arc light, and I made a decision. Oh, I'm not talking about when someone at the bar says, "Will you have another?" That's not a decision. That's a reflex action. I have a crease in my neck even after the time that I have been sober from saying yes. And I do want to tell you that about 2 weeks after I had attended my first meeting, that after exercising all of the intrigue that I could amount and changing direction several times, covering the same places that I had to go to, but not bars, one day I walked around the corner, and there were two of my contemporaries. They had a corner in the jug, and we are blessed, perhaps blessed, with great generosity when we are stoned, smashed, or whatever turns you on and off. And they said, "Eddie, we thought you were dead." It's not complimentary when you have been nurtured with tender loving care and modern medications that you run into two guys who look like death warmed over, and they say, "We thought you were dead." One man said to the man who had the jug with only a corner left, "Give our friend Eddy a drink." Strange noise came out of me. I said, "No, thank you." I didn't explain why. I didn't think they'd understand anyway, because the only thing we can say to one who is really under the influence is have another. And if he doesn't answer, he is dead. But they weren't going to take no for an answer. The other one said once again, "Maybe he didn't hear you." And so once again, I said, "No, thank you." That sound has haunted me day and night. It was so strange that I thought it was voices from above. But it saved my life. It taught me that I no longer had to be a hostage of self or a hostage to be held in bondage until death by what came out of a bottle. They weren't going to let that get by either. And so one said to the other, "He's got religion." I didn't say anything to that. I was beginning once again to renew my acquaintance and my friendship with a power greater than myself. And I certainly wasn't going to be a smart ass and kill that before it got established. The other guy said, "He's got ulcers." Isn't it remarkable what diagnosis you can get and not have to pay for it? They gave up. They went their way, and with God's grace, I went mine. I remember the time that transpired rather, between when I was discharged from the hospital and when the first meeting. I remember that night, as I told you, making the decision. Made a decision A decision is where you put action where your mouth is. The other stuff is let's know them again and see if they'll take it. I entered this room. It was a subterranean room. There were 3 other people there. They asked me to sit down, which was the extent of my athletic prowess at the time. One man brought a cup. Another man held my head. And that wasn't anything new, because for a long time before I came to AA, the first drink in the morning defied the laws of nature and of physics by putting a towel behind the back of my head and pulling on it so that I could get a hold of a glass and pull it up to my mouth. I don't think that did anything for me that would cause me to mention it if it were not at an AA meeting. All they talked about was what drink does to us. God, I didn't have to come to AA to find out what drink did to me. But that was all they knew. We had a rule. In fact, we had a couple of them. And don't jump up and down and say there are no rules in AA. This was before we had traditions. And I can promise every one of you that if in your group business meetings you voice the conscience of the group, no more rules will get in. But with the expansion in numbers who join our rank, who could come to a meeting of the size of 1/2 of one of these sides here and get lost because nobody knew them, or they were too busy expostulating on some new theory that they had that might change some of the writings of our founders. The rule was, you do not speak until you have been sober 6 months. And the rebels today say to me, I would have walked out. And I will say to you what the late Bill W. said in my presence to someone who said that. Where the hell would we go when we walked out? Who else wants any part of us? I'm a grateful member of this fellowship. I know that you probably never heard anybody say that they weren't. But maybe you saw that they weren't when they were asked to do something and they got awfully busy. Or it was not the right sex that they were going to make a 12-step call on. And maybe she didn't have an apartment and a car and a job. Could be any kind of a reason. But gratitude isn't something we talk about. is something that we show without any ostentation or expectance of reward. I was really extremely impressed when I found out that we had a program. Up until that time, I thought that everything was that you listened for 6 months. I listened. And you know, I learned more in that 6 months what not to do than I did what to do. Because drunkalogs are reruns, and sometimes they can be obnoxious. And I was an investigative reporter, so I knew that from 1 week to the next week, that such changes could never take place in a person's story unless they had gone back out again. When people say my story isn't as dramatic as I would like it, this is not a library exercise in telling tall tales, I assure you. If it's what you did and it's truthful, pray to God that you don't have to make it dramatic, because some of the dramas end up in a very sad and sour note. When I was drinking, nobody had the colossal gall, including my eccentric publishers, to say, "Why don't you quit drinking?" They didn't say that. They did, I didn't hear them. There was nobody who said, "You have used up the book, all the coupons and the covers, the next time you're out." There wasn't anybody to say that. I was in what I really reveled in, that state of single blessedness. There was no War Department that says, if you shape up, you may get a 3-day pass at the weekend. There was no one to say, what did you do with the money that you got when you got your paycheck? It wasn't until I thought out in AA, until I started to work the steps, that I found out that my enthusiasm for single blessedness was merely that, being an irresponsible person, I didn't want to be responsible for anything. But AA taught me. AA taught me to make commitments, to keep commitments. AA taught me that I have no license at any time to be judgmental. That's very difficult in the early stages when you have been everybody's business manager as a drunk. I knew nothing about love. In the bar, I learned something about economics. I was a sedentary souse. I sat and guarded my change and my booze. And I didn't play follow the leader with those who chased after the chicks, because I saw with my own eyes that while they were gone, so was their booze and their change. So I got inspired to learn that if you're going to be good in sports, take them one at a time. And that applies to these early, I think they call them relationships, where two emotionally retarded individuals enter into a non-committal arrangement, which I describe as double parking shack-up jobs, before it's time. It is suggested to us, and everything in our program is suggested, which makes me wonder at times, why do people panic and get so frenzied mad when suggestions are made to them that if they don't want to do them, nobody can force them to do them? And I used to hear people say there are no musts in AA, which is a half-truth, because on 2 pages there are several musts. But they leave that dangling possible so that people get confused what they mean to say after they have been squared away is that I cannot make musts for you and you cannot make musts for me. But there's one thing that's very, very true. Those who question the credulity of our philosophy that it's the first drink that can get you drunk, I ask you, try not taking that first drink and see if you can get drunk. On occasions in my family home, my father and my mother and my 2 brothers and sisters would have company on some feast day. And it was only on those occasions that anything with alcohol in it, except rubbing alcohol, was provided, like a tribal meeting. They were going to debate what will we do with it. Well, if you're a third person singular personal pronoun, you must have had something to do with it, because you don't have to be. Nobody's called me in yet since I got sober. So my mother would appoint one of my brothers as the dispenser of the drinks, and in a stage whisper that needed no amplification, she would say to him, "Make Edwards very light." Aren't those joyous words? Doesn't it make you feel that you're wanted, loved? And it doesn't make any of us feel that we're being put on. We just think that these loving people who care don't want us to get hurt. So my brother was innocent, followed directions, and when he passed out all of the others, my being the last, as they say in the Bible, I refused to drink. Now don't think I'm a martyr. Don't think that I had more willpower than you did. I had 2 pints up in my bedroom. It's easy to say you don't want something when you have more of it than you can handle right at one time. So I excused myself. I was very polite. I was brought up that way. I excused myself. I wasn't mad at anybody. I left the tribal meeting and went up to my room and enjoyed in the comfort of a nice soft bed with several pillows of the nectar of the god. As I look back at it now, the analysis of such actions can be very exact, and that people who emotional stability level is much below our chronological age, which starts at birth and is not interrupted at any time even by lying, namely our age. Rigor mortis is the only thing that ends that at whatever it is. I think I mentioned to you, or I mentioned to someone today, that I always believed in God, I said. Of course, I didn't call upon him often. I didn't, as I do now, ask him every day to guide my thinking. I used him as a designated hitter. When I was in a position, and it was position, in bed and couldn't get out of bed, I would say, God, help me to get out of this mess, and I will never do it again. But I was playing games like we play games with our sponsors, maybe with counselors or doctors in treatment. At my second meeting, remember at the first meeting there were 3 of us. At my second meeting, a week later, there were 2, and I was one of the 2. So you will pardon me if I'm not overduly impressed with numbers. At that point, I got a message. It's true that our fellowship is made up of people and that we share and we care. But if the people are not going to be around, then I've got to have someone who, when I ask for help, not only will answer, but they won't say who's calling. They will know that it's Eddy because Eddy calls every day. I don't ask things for myself other than to guide my thinking, because I have what I need, and I'm a firm believer you can't take it with you. I can't even keep it while I got it here. I found within the confines of the 12 suggested steps, whose verbiage does not exceed 200 words, and that all of those words are found in dictionaries and lexicons, no matter where the language differs. They all mean the same. Now, as a drunk, since I didn't have power, I was powerless. I turned in the first step to the source, the greatest source, as our book tells us, of power. Why go to some other supplier who hasn't a reputation of responsibility and service? Why not go to the top, since you and I have as much right to ask directly for help? And then I found out that my life had become unmanageable. Unmanageability may have degrees, but if you're going to chin yourself on degrees, I have a note that is factual, that there is a certain thermometer that has more degrees than you and I can think of or earn in the academic world. So I started practicing the principles. They're in the book. They are in a paragraph which says, and these three things are essential. The word essential means they're necessary. But you know how we are. Maybe that other guy needs them, but I got a hold of it. I got it all together. I shudder when I hear that, because I don't know whether it's going to be a tornado or a cyclone or what's going to hit next when someone of us, in a moment of insanity, says, I've got it all together, I got it made. Many people tell me that the third step bugs the hell out of them. Do you know, for me, that was the greatest relief I had, because as a drunk and being everybody's business manager, I was carrying quite a load, inside and outside. And I was worn down. Difficult to carry the woe of the world on your shoulders, especially when you're not getting paid for it. And in that third step, I formed a partnership with the power greater than myself. Needless to say, God is the senior partner. You don't move up from third broom in an upholstered sword, despite what some pointed head speaker in AA tells you is going to happen when you get sober. You move along in God's time, and you accept God's time. And if the word time bugged you, that's a gift that God gives us in the beginning so we can get our second breath. He isn't the God of vengeance. He's the God of love and understanding. Otherwise, you and I might get what we deserve. And so every day I have a meeting. We don't have many secretaries and we don't have computers. We don't have all day to talk. But every day I do talk to God. That's so because the book says there may come to all of us, or any of us, at some time when all that stands between us is an ever-loving God. So if it comes to me, it'll be no surprise. I will not panic. I will not wonder, am I worthy to ask? Because my primary purpose is what the book Alcoholics Anonymous says is the primary purpose of all of us. And in time, if you read the book, the Alcoholics Anonymous book, starting at page 1, not 495, or page 83 or 87. It's a book, starts at page 1. There are 6 chapters in that book, the first 6 that have within their pages the knowledge that all of us need at all times to understand that it was no idle boast that we were told that anything that has anything at all to do with our problem we can find within those pages the answer as to how we should act or how we should respond. And if I may, I'd like to digress just for a moment. Please bear with me. As I was growing up, the Bible acquired the reputation as being the most misquoted book that was ever published. The devil can quote Scripture. Maybe the sources of some of the things that I hear came from Satan himself. They didn't come from God. Do you know that our book, which does not need any rewriting, does not need any updating, does not need changes, is fast taking over from the Bible as the most misquoted? And if you're sitting squirming saying, who the hell does he think he is? I know who I am. I hope you'll find out. The big book does not imply that this is a selfish program. It does say that we are selfish people, and that should come to no surprise. But it says that unless we are willing to come out of self and think of others, that's sharing, not people pleasing. Then we may not be able to keep that newfound gift, our sobriety, unless we acquire the willingness to share. So if you're going to share, please be sure that it's the book Alcoholics that you talk about. It's not a form of criticism. It goes way beyond that. On more than one occasion, my friend, your friend too, who's now dead, and has been dead for quite some time, the late Bill W., said in my presence, if AA ever goes down the drain, it'll be an inside job. Don't say those things aren't possible, because a century before AA came into the picture, an organization known as the Washingtonians, who had as many members as we've had at times, they went down the drain because they allowed individuals to bring into their discussions and their studies things that had nothing to do with helping one another to stay sober, such as slavery. Politics got into the act, in due respect to any politician's presence. Real things can happen, sometimes not for the good, at high levels in politics. As the newspapers say, they make news. And I believe at times that if they weren't making news, no news would be good news. I found within the confines of those steps all of the help that I needed. I didn't need to go to some state or county-operated treatment center where they charge you to take a course in the 12 steps. That's a violation, and the ones who charge are members of our fellowship who work at the county place. And when reminded of it, they said that may be the way you interpret it. We live one day at a time. It's about all you can handle. I don't even take other people's inventory when I have them as clients and they're paying me to come with their problems. Have you arrived at that point in growth where you really and truly can say and mean that I will go to any length to gain and keep my sobriety? One of the blessings, and I view it as a blessing, is we are not shown flashbacks of what's going to happen in the future. We are not given a preview of what and whom and when trouble may come into our lives. But when choices must be made, when a person, place, or thing, good in itself as it may well be, can be seen as casting a shadow between that which we are told in the program that we must do if we want what we're going to have. It is suggested to us that we pray. I'm a great believer in prayer, but I hasten to add that if you're praying for something, give it some thought, if it's for you, because you might get it, and then I wouldn't be able to tell you, if you don't want it, what to do with it. I have seen people rocked and rolled over such a thing. We have the word gratitude. I've never heard anybody get up and say that they were not grateful. But I have heard people say, it's easy to be grateful when everything comes out even. That isn't gratitude. That's self-aggrandizement. That's getting your own way, and you enjoy it. Once I heard a man who said that he had 3 months in the program give a dissertation as his talk on serenity. He had trouble in the middle of it and gave visual signs that what he had been talking about wasn't what you and I understand as serenity. Serenity is something that exists. It's the ability that when all the world is crumbling around you on the inside, to have, through the practice of patience and some other byproducts of patience, and to maintain within you a peace of heart. You can't buy it in bulk and store it up. But it's available. We have a prayer. It's a universal prayer. Some people accredit it to AA until they find out that it goes back to the 2nd century, and that was a little before my time anyway. The first word is God. That's where we ask for serenity. And we're asking for serenity to accept. There is a distinct difference. It is not nitpicking to say that acceptance is when we let go and let God, if we find it difficult. But it is not submission where we say, there ain't anything I can do about it. I'll accept it, but I don't like it. That's not accepting. You and I don't have to approve of what we are going to accept, because what we're going to accept sometimes isn't convenient, it isn't pleasurable, but it precludes the idea that we just took it off the top of our head, because the third part of that prayer, we ask for wisdom to accept the things we can't change. Probably the most misused and even ignored part of that prayer is the second part, in which we ask for the courage to change the things we can. Of those that have come to my attention, have come to me to ask for help in that area, I find out that since they ask God to grant them serenity, that they admit that they have been trying to change it. One thing that we've learned in our experience in AA, that quite often it's better to let things happen than to try to make them happen. If you don't like your employer and you tell me that I don't know if I can stay sober working for him, giving him titles that I don't care to hear about. We don't change other people. That may be difficult to accept. But in the process of trying to change other people, we get frustrated, we get annoyed, we get angry, we get rageful, we get drunk. Surely no one is perfect, but that's a fear you and I don't have to have, because the book says this is not a program of perfection. And I know a couple of guys who insisted they were perfect, and before they left they said it's very lonely at the top. I don't want to be lonely. I was lonely as a drunk. I want to be like you, in there trying. I like to mention that I used the word single blessedness early on. And when I was sober about 5 years, and second step and the third step and the fourth and fifth and sixth and seventh steps, 8, 9, 10, and 11 became not just something on the wall or in the big book, and even the 12 made some dramatic changes. I know that I was totally selfish. I know that I was definitely self-centered. I know that I didn't know how to share. I would give you something that I didn't like, but I wouldn't share with you anything I liked. And God in this program changed me. And so I realized that it was not good for this man to be alone. I didn't want an affair any more than I came to this program to get a monkey off my back or to get my license back, which I didn't have. I didn't need it. I lived in the bars. I came to stay, and that has a hell of a lot to do with why I'm here now. Because in order to stay, you will follow the solution, the directions, not because you have to, but because you realize that the prescriptions that were given to us were not so much of the earthly kind as they were heavenly inspired. You have to live, as I did for 12 years in this program before we had the traditions to realize that only God watching over us would keep the whole shebang from going down the sewer. I looked about for a mate. I didn't find her in our fellowship. When they say that opposites attract opposites, this was true. She didn't know even the names of drinks. She didn't know about prices. She didn't know what drunks were. There were none in her family. So I sat her down, and I gave her a blow by blow description of what I was like before I came to AA. I know that it shocked her, and I think she went around Mars and Jupiter and a few more planets. And when she came back, I asked her to marry me. I have had nearly 12 years of happy marriage in which there were no sharp recriminations, during which she never had to wonder if I would come home, how I would come home, or when I would come home. She never had to lie because she didn't have money to pay the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker. Because this program works if you work it, as long as you work it. And in the latter part of the 11th year of our marriage, God saw fit to call her. She died of cancer. But before she died, she told me that I had given her the best years of her life. How silly it would be for me to think anything but the fact that what I was then, what I am now, is because of the solution in this program in which God is my motivator and my director. Before she died, we had a daughter. The daughter was 9, nearly 10 when the mother died. It was a time of bereavement. I had learned love in its true sense. I'd learned acceptance, because my reason that helped me to accept that separation is logical. I would be selfish to insist that she stay longer when every second and moment of her life was intense pain that no medicine could do anything about alleviating it. The daughter is and was and is a carbon copy of the mother. When the mother died, I devoted time to her. Only my work and my regular AA interfered. I had help. Two of her aunts who were unwed played the role of mother. At the age of 19, when she was to start college, she and her boyfriend came to me and said they wanted to marry. You get some wonderful occasions that would rid you of any suspicion that you got it made or that there's not more to do. That was one of them. I wasn't with it. I thought that they were asking my permission to get married at some day way in the future. So I made the mistake of asking questions. And it's my fault because I know better. I said, when? And they said, in a month. Oh, I'll have to think that over. What I meant was, let's not talk about it now anyway. And so I prayed, and the answer came back to me that you are not God, and that you cannot run her life for the rest of her life. So I got inspired, and I said to both of them, now let me put it this way. You have my blessing, but there will be an interim. She is a 4.0 student. She's just finished high school. She has a scholarship to college. You know, and I know, and she knows, that with talent, if we don't improve and extend it when we can, it may not be around. So both of them assured me that her education wouldn't be interrupted. They kept that promise. Both of them in that period of time after he graduated and she transferred to Maryland, near where his work was. She finished college. Both of them, being students, both have their masters. I would like at this time to thank you for coming. I would like to tell you I'm a firm believer there are no strangers in AA. They're just friends we haven't met. And if time were possible and the occasion presented itself, I want to be your friend. You're my kind of people. You are the ones that I enjoy most being with, because I don't have to pretend when I'm with you. I don't have to people please when I'm with you. And I would like to close was part of an inscription that I saw several years ago somewhere on the outskirts of Ottawa. It was engraved over the archway of a stone building that was being used at this time as sort of a halfway house for alcoholics. It is part of an essay by a French philosopher. His name is Camus, C-A-M-U-S. And the part that I saw there, that I cherished within my heart, I offer to you now. Don't walk behind me, I may not lead. Don't walk before me, I may not follow. But please walk beside me and be my friend. God bless you.
To thank him properly, I'd like to call on the co-sponsor, or the co-chairman, Doug.
Hi everybody, my name is Doug and I'm an alcoholic. It's my privilege tonight to thank Eddy for sharing and carrying his experience, strength, and hope from the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous with us tonight. I just feel so good because Eddy made us laugh tonight, made us feel good, and I'm sure you're experiencing that joy that Eddy shared. And then Eddy shared with us the importance of the principles of our program and how we can carry that message forward and put it into effect in our own lives on a daily basis. And I'm glad that Eddy made the commitment to come to our convention and share that with us tonight. And on behalf of the Central West Ontario Convention Committee and each and every one of you, I want to extend our token of appreciation to Eddy, our friend.
So somebody said to me before I started this meeting, they says, you'll screw up someplace, and they were right. They said, you're supposed to qualify. Well, I think just making all the mistakes I make is enough to qualify me to be any kind of an alcoholic. Tomorrow morning, I would like to suggest that if you wish, the sunrise spiritual service will be here at 7:30. Secondly, AA is honored with the fact that we're allowed to smoke in this room. But unfortunately, we have been leaving the ashtrays and a little mess behind, and I would like to suggest that when you're leaving this time, you take the mess with you to the back or to the front. And I would thank you for that. And just to say thank you to our program chairman who is sitting up at the front here tonight, Terry, whom I think has done an excellent job up to this point. I would like a hand for him. And I would like to also announce that in our midst tonight we have a couple of people that, you know, they come a long way sometimes, and one guy, I keep calling him a funny name. I think he's called Snoop. I call him Scoop, and, you know, and tonight he's celebrating, I think, 17 years. And to relay a message to a beautiful, beautiful man who many of you know from this conference over the years, Carl Myers, who also today is celebrating 31. And there's someone in here very special to him who will take it back to him. Let's give an applause for Carl. And on behalf of myself and my committee, up to this point, we'd like to say thank you for your participation, and remember that there are three pertinent ideas in Alcoholics Anonymous: that I am an alcoholic, that my life is unmanageable, but that no human power can relieve me or you of our alcoholism, but God could and will if we let him. Would you join hands and close with the Our Father?